There's the live stream. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the pre-show. We are 10 minutes away from getting started with today's 220-1001 Core 1 A+ study group. We've got questions for you. We've got answers for you. We've got lots of things to go through today. Stream is up and running. Welcome, everybody. If you're watching over on the YouTube, you may want to flip over to where we have the chat set up at professormesser.com/live. That's the name of it. And there's a live stream link there. There's chat there. Join us here. Now you're watching the pre-show. We'll get started in about 10 minutes, just under now, and get everything there. The A+ study group. I'll put the link there. Live. There we go. And so in the chat, everybody can see it. Welcome, everybody. Good to have you here. It's been a couple of weeks. We try to get the last week of the month to be a week off. This time it was the first week of the month because we're here in July and it was Independence Day last week. So a lot of you folks were out and about, seeing the beach or vacationing or taking some time, as did I. Didn't really leave to go anywhere, but I did take a little time. And so we're back in the studio for a live stream. So we shifted everything about a week. So this week will be A+ on Tuesday and Thursday. We'll do Network Plus on Wednesday of next week. And Security Plus will be Wednesday of the week after. All right, that part's working well. Analytics look good. Numbers look good. Health is good. Not my health, but the health of the stream. That's what it says on my screen. The health is good. Like, how do they know? How does YouTube know my health? No, not my health. So let's put this up. We'll get that going. That looks good. Nice. Don't forget the live Q&A. Pop open a new browser window and go to professormesser.com/QA. We'll redirect you over. It doesn't really do this. Why am I spinning? No, doesn't work that way. Hello, Bert. Welcome. Bert is in Sarasota, Florida, which is a lovely place to be. LA's checking in. Hey, Jason. Thank you for being on the live stream. So we got East Coast, West Coast right off. Boom. Sarasota, although technically Sarasota, West Coast too, right? So it just depends on your perspective. And my perspective is confused. That's what my perspective is. Oh, now I'm dropping stuff. Things are falling on the floor. This is my color check. Focus pad. Everything looks fine. All right. Okay, Texas, I guess, would be the third coast, wouldn't it? Welcome, Texas. We shall not mess with you. Joe is in New Jersey. Welcome, Joe. We've got plenty of questions today. It's all A+ today. Houston, welcome. It means I'm one day closer to you. They've got A+ QA today, all 1001 QA. So we're very focused. UK is here. Welcome. So we're going way over to the other part of the sunlight in the UK. Good to have you here. We've got 1001 questions in the first hour, and then it's just open phone lines in the second, which means it could last 5 minutes or it could last a second. Nigeria is here. Welcome. Thank you for being here on the live stream. We have plenty to go through today. I wrote these questions a while back. Wow, Tokyo is here. Oh, your time frames are really messed up. Good midnight in Tokyo, is it? That's welcome here. We will put you to sleep, I assure you. Maine is here. I just got back from Maine not too long ago. So nice up there. Perfect time of the year to be there. Raleigh's checking in. Cincinnati. There's another California here in the chat room. If you're on the YouTube side, you'll notice there's no chat there. Or there shouldn't be a chat there if I've done everything right. The chat that I am referring to is at professormesser.com/live. That's the chat. There's Baston. Welcome, Boston. Good to have you here. Haven't been up to Boston in a while. I think I said that the last live stream. Boston showed up. Need to get up there. I was thinking of going up there before going to Maine. I ran out of time. Did not make it to Boston. Another Texas is here. Another Texas is here. Texas is just everywhere. You're all up in my chat room, Texas. We've got, I don't even remember the questions. I probably should put the questions up so I can reference them. There's Mississippi. Question link is professormesser.com/QA. All the links that you will need are at professormesser.com/live. /live is all the links. /QA is the questions. There's Garland, another Texas. Lots of Texas to have that there. I know that's where we should be focusing on getting all the Texas people in. I don't know what happened there. Maybe I'm only sending it to Texas. Maybe that's what happened. There's Southern California. Welcome. SoCal is here. We've got, when's the last time I was in Southern California? It's been a couple years now. I just don't get out to that coast as much as I used to. As some of you know, I used to have a job where all I did was travel. That's all I did constantly. I was traveling. So it was interesting. That is not the Q&A link. So we'll get rid of that. If you want to go to QA, it's professormesser.com/QA. That's easy to remember. There's Tasman Drive. See, that's where I used to hang out whenever I would travel West Coast. Tasman Drive in the San Jose area. They're in Milpitas. We've got Tennessee, Connecticut, Tampa, Florida, Harrisburg, PA, Portugal, welcome. Wesley Chapel down near Tampa. Mississippi again, welcome. Waco is here. I missed Waco up there. Sorry, Ben. Saw you come in. Didn't say anything. Just give you a head nod, like there's Ben. Doesn't help doing a head nod if you can't actually see the head nodding. Raleigh checking in. Kentucky, how are we doing on time? For those of you waiting to get started, about 2.5 minutes, and we'll get going. I've got to find all of the questions that I did. I write the questions now almost weeks ahead of time. So by the time the study group comes along, it's all new to me. They're all new things. I hope I finish them. Wouldn't that be something? Ohio, welcome. Chris is on the sunny south coast of the UK. Welcome. Thank you for being here. We've got some of you are checking in thanks to your sign up on the emails, but of course we send out the tweets and the Facebook posts and that kind of thing. So we'll figure it out. Brighton is here. Carrollton, Georgia. Welcome. Thank you for being here. There's Costa Rica. That's a place I need to get down to. I need to take my surfing lessons, which would be a disaster. But if I was to take surfing lessons, that's where I would go, Costa Rica. I hear the surfing lessons, they are amazing. But I miss that window, I think. I don't know, maybe I could do it now. I think I might be in good enough shape to do that now. Chicago here, welcome. And all that jazz. We've got 45 seconds. Kansas City, Mo. KC Mo, welcome. Let me see if we've got all the audio set right. We do. I guess I can turn that off for now. Video looks good. Recordings are going. Recording is going on the stream up here. Recording is going down here. That's my Cylons down here. They're recording. So that's where that is. We've got video ready. I think we're ready. Audio is here. You're here. Everything seems to be working. I make sure my phone is turned off. No bad messages about bad weather, so a little bit different. The chat is disabled on YouTube. I can only read one thing at a time. Usually I can only read no things at a time, but that's the way it goes. And according to my watch beeping, it is time to get started with this, so let's get the study group going. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the July 2019 Professor Messer A Plus Study Group. This is the 221,001 A Plus Study Group coming to you live from our world headquarters here in Tallahassee, Florida. Thank you for being here. My name is James Messer. I will be your host for this next hour of A Plus Q&A. I will ask you questions, and if you are here watching this live, you can answer these questions interactively, and I'll give you information on how all of that works in just a moment so that you will be able to participate with us. It's always part of the fun. If you're watching this on the replay, you can still hang out and watch this go through. You just can't go online to have a look at what the questions are, but we'll show you everything on the screen. You'll be set. No problems there. We are able to do this study group thanks to your support. Of course, our A-plus study group and all our A-plus study courses and all of our courses are available to watch for free on the internet. You can watch every minute of every video. There is no registration. It's not behind a paywall. I don't keep back certain videos so that you can't see them. You see everything. I make a video, I put it on the internet, and I make a video for every single topic from the 221,001 and 221,002 A-plus exam objectives. You can watch all of those on my website at professormesser.com. Some people like to have a downloadable version of those videos. I have downloadable course notes. I have downloadable audio versions. I have video versions and bundles of those. You can find those at professormesser.com/1000 videos, 1000 videos. Of course, always watch what we're doing on the YouTube and the Twitter. We're sending A-plus top pop quiz questions every day that I write completely fresh and new. They're all new every day at professormesser.com/Twitter. And anytime we do a study group, we're always on the YouTube at professormesser.com/YouTube. You want to listen in sometime during this first hour if you're someone who collects continuing education unit credits. I will send you an email that has been digitally signed by me that says you must have watched it. I will give you instructions on how to do that sometime during the first hour, if that's something you would like to do. Today, we're going to talk about all the questions from the 221,001, what CompTIA is calling the Core 1 A-plus certification. This is a certification that was made available in January, because we're now here in July. But of course, the 900 series exams are still out there and available. So we've had this overlap period since the beginning of January where you could take either the 900 series exams or the 1000 series exams. You have to decide which one you want to take. Now, if you've already been studying for a while for the 900 series, then you can keep doing that as long as you're able to complete and pass both of those exams by July 31st. As we sit here today, it's July the 9th. That does not give you a lot of time. So if you are in the middle of doing this, you may want to take a step back and think that perhaps you should shift gears over to the 1000 series. Now, if you're already invested in the 900 series, you've already taken a 901 and passed it, you've already taken maybe the 902 and passed it, you have to take the other exam. I understand. You want to get that done before the end of July, because once July 31st hits, the 900 series is retired and the only exams available are the 1000 series. So right now, when most people say, which one should I take? Right now, your best choice is the 1000 series. As I mentioned, they were released in January. So make sure you have a look at those. The exam requirements and the passing grades and everything relating to the exam is exactly the same, though, between the two. There are two different exams. On the 1001, you need a 675 out of 900. On the 1002, you need a 700 on a scale. Really, the scale's between 100 and 900. It's an odd scale, isn't it? Fortunately, if you have been studying for the 900 series and you're wondering, do I really want to move over to the 1000 series? Am I going to lose a lot of time? You aren't, because on the 1000 series, I would say only about 20% of that content is new on the 1000 series. That means 80% or so of the 1000 series exams consists of information that you previously learned on the 900 series. So it's very easy to make the transition. You're not having to start over from the beginning, which is great. And right now at this late date, because the 900 series is retiring, jumping over the 1000 series is a pretty good idea. Highly recommend that one for you to do. The two exams themselves are structured effectively the same as well. They might be in a different order of content. For example, on the 1001 exam, mobile devices is now the first section of the exam objectives. It used to be farther down in the list. Networking is the second. Hardware virtualization, cloud computing, and hardware and network troubleshooting. So those will be the topics we focus on today with the 220-1001, what CompTIA calls their Core 1. These courses, as I mentioned, are available for download. If someone would like to have a look at those, you go out to my website. Some people like to have an offline version of these. So it's one thing that I do make available is you can download versions of these, and I have them available for both the 1001 and the 1002. For those of you listening in to the podcast, all of these, or to this live stream, I make a podcast version of it. Some people refer to this event as the podcast, which I'm fine with as well. The podcast and all of my study group podcasts are available at professormesser.com/podcast. So have a look at that. You've got streams there that you can click on and listen to on that page on demand. Also, RSS feeds are on that page. You can link it to your podcasting program. So when I upload this edition that we did today, this recording today, I'll upload it later today. And if you have a podcast program, it automatically gets downloaded. So you'll just be in your car or you'll be traveling, you'll be working out, and suddenly that podcast will just be there and waiting. So another nice thing to have available. Also, for those of you that like to watch the video replay, there's a YouTube version of this. And my marketing manager, Lori, who is watching this replay, hi, Lori, everybody else says hello. She takes and timestamps everything that we do. So if you're trying to find a particular piece of information, a particular question, you're trying to find someone who called in with a particular question that they had, it's all in the YouTube video description. So have a look. You can click on the time and it will jump right to the timestamp of the video, which is kind of nice. So that might help you if you're trying to find something that you heard previously, or you just like to jump around a little quickly through all of the questions and the answers. That's one good way to do it. Obviously can't do that while we're live. That's only on the replay, and she usually gets that up a couple days after we have the replay there. She has to go back and listen to all of it. So be patient with her. She's doing a fantastic job with those. It's nice to have those there. You can go back a year or so and find all of those timestamps. So today we're going to be asking you questions from the 1001. Here's how you can do it. Have a look at this link. It's professormesser.com/QA. So pop open a new browser window and go to professormesser.com/QA. That will take you directly to a question that's waiting for you, by the way, if everything works properly there. There's also an app that you can download. The app is called the Socrative Student app. This is a service we use called Socrative, and it will ask you for a room name in that app. The room name is Professor Messer. PROFESSORMESSER, both of those. So make sure that you type that in right, you have the name correct, because if you don't, there will not be a question there waiting for you. You have to make sure that those are there. So if you are able to do that, you go out to professormesser.com/QA. There will be a question waiting for you. We call this our rewind question because it's a question from last month. Let's see if you remember. The question asks, a network administrator would like to consolidate log files from all firewalls, switches, and routers. Which of the following protocols would be the best choice for this requirement? And if you go out to professormesser.com/QA, you'll be able to see what the possible answers are. Here they are. They are SSH, SNMP, syslog, SMB, and LDAP. And as you can see on the screen, we can see what people are answering. 67% of you, for example, have answered syslog so far. 22% have said SNMP, and then we have single digits for SMB, LDAP, and SSH. Well, if you remember from last month, we know that consolidating information to a single log file is specific to the syslog protocol. That's what syslog does. That's its job. SNMP, a lot of people chose SNMP, 20% of you did. SNMP is used for this real-time statistical gathering from these devices. So if you wanted to query a router to find out utilization or uptime, if you wanted to query a switch to find out configuration information, you can do that. But when we're talking about log consolidation, which is a very different thing, we're talking about syslog. And it's usually consolidating it for use in a SIM so that you can then create reports, do alarms, create alerts. It puts it all into a massive drive array so that you can do something with it. So those of you that were here last month, I think you remembered it was C. 73% of you say that it was syslog, and you'd be absolutely correct. That is the right answer. So now hopefully you were able to get into and look at the study group. You were able to get in and view the information about the questions that are there. Just stay on that page. I will automatically change the questions for you on that page. You simply have to go to professormesser.com/QA. One of the things you'll remember from the A+ exam, if you've ever taken any of these CompTIA exams before, if you recall, it was not all multiple choice questions. CompTIA at the very beginning of the exam will give you a handful or so of what they call performance-based questions. These are questions that are anything but the questions that are multiple choice. There's a lot of multiple choice questions on the exam. You will get to those, but the first section that's right at the beginning is the performance-based questions. Make sure that you go through and look at all of those performance-based questions. Some people like to jump over them and come back to them later because the exam lets you jump around to any question you'd like. Some people like to attack those questions first thing. It's completely a personal preference. Make sure you go through and have a look at what the options are for you. But on my study groups, the first question of the study group, I like to make a performance-based question. And for those of you that have been looking at these different exam performance-based questions, I get questions all the time where people will say, I need some examples. Well, if you go back through the last year of study groups, the first question we do on every study group is a performance-based question. So you can go back and have a look at what some different options might be. Here is your performance-based question of the day. And by the way, the performance-based question you're going to get is one that is a fill in the blank online. It's really more of a putting things in order question. The performance-based questions could be fill in the blank. You could be putting things in order. They could be drag and drop. You might be matching things on the screen. You never know what you're going to get with performance-based questions. Here is your performance-based question of the day. It asks to order these technologies from highest throughput to lowest. And here are 5 different technologies that I would like you to order from highest throughput to lowest. And it is A is SATA Revision 2.0, B is USB 3.1, C is Parallel ATA, D is Thunderbolt V3, and E is the total throughput of 802.11n, as in November. So those are your 5 technologies: SATA Revision 2.0, USB 3.1, Parallel ATA, Thunderbolt V3, and the total throughput of 802.11n. So if you think you know what those throughputs are, do not put any information into the chat room. Don't put any hints in the chat room. You want to take all of the knowledge that you have and put it into professormesser.com/QA. That's where you want to go to put in the order that you think this happens to be. Maybe you do know what the order is. Have a look through some of these different options and see if you can put them in the order. You may not have an exact number in your head for some of these, but maybe you can order them just so they're highest to lowest. The question did not ask you what that throughput actually is. So if you have a pretty good idea if one happens to be faster than another, you may be able to adjust your list a little bit and still get credit for this particular question. I say still get credit. I'm not really giving any credit. We're not doing an actual test right now. But if you were looking at the test and on the exam, you would probably want to know that there was a particular credit associated with this. So let's see how you did with this. We're going to step through each one of these and put them highest throughput to lowest, and have it in your mind because we're going to go to a blank page here and sort of start off again. And for those of you listening, SATA Revision 2.0, USB 3.1, Parallel ATA, Thunderbolt V3, and the total throughput of 802.11n. Which one would you put at the top for the highest throughput? Well, I think in this particular list of what the highest throughput would be, Thunderbolt V3 would be the highest. And that's because version 3 of Thunderbolt supports 40 gigabits per second of throughput. So that would be a good one to keep your eye on as far as speeds are concerned. That's why we connect a lot of external displays with Thunderbolt. We connect a lot of external storage with Thunderbolt. It's a very high speed throughput. Second on the list would be USB 3.1 because USB 3.1 runs at 10 gigabits per second. Still pretty fast, but not as fast as Thunderbolt V3, obviously. up at 40 gigabits per second. Third on our list then would be SATA Revision 2.0. And if we look at the stats for SATA Revision 2.0, it runs at 3 gigabits per second. We could have put SATA Revision 3.0 there too, couldn't we? Because it would be 60 gigabits per second. So I guess it depends what the next one on our list happens to be. Next on our list is the total throughput of 802.11n. And that throughput for that wireless standard is 600 megabits per second for all of the different streams that you could have going at the same time on that standard. And that leaves the final option on our list, which would be parallel ATA. That PATA connection, PATA's back to the A+ exam. We didn't have PATA in the 900 series, and they brought back PATA. It's actually listed as IDE in the exam objectives. I don't know either, but they did. And parallel ATA runs at a measly 133 megabits per second. Obviously, you can see why we made the jump from PATA to SATA. We went from 133 megabits per second at its best possible day to, in some cases, up to 6 gigabits per second for SATA Revision 3.0. So a significant increase in throughput by going to SATA. I think that's why we don't really use PATA anymore. Where you're going to see PATA are these legacy systems and see some of those things that are associated with it. So for those of you that are watching, Thunderbolt V3, USB 3.1, SATA Revision 2.0, the total throughput of 802.11n, and parallel ATA is the list. And of course, as you're looking at this, the order was very important. You may find that Thunderbolt V3 and parallel ATA, there's a huge difference between those two. This specifically asks to order from the highest throughput to lowest. Make sure you watch those kinds of things on your exam. You don't want to be in a situation where you're putting things in a different order. You're putting things from lowest to highest. That's not what they asked for. Make sure you get those pieces right. Well, I'm very quickly, you can see my screen is flashing a little bit. So I'm very quickly going to change I'm going to actually power down one of these video displays that I use. I'm going to power it back up, and we're going to see if that fixes some of the problems we saw with this. This is one where if you've ever seen this configuration, I have everything here on a single APU that I can work through. So the screen that is flashing is the one for my laptop here. I'm going to turn off that MacBook Pro HDMI configuration that's there. It actually converts it from HDMI to SDI, which is the standard that I use whenever I am working with all of my video switching equipment. That's right here. It's a very common standard for using those. And let's turn that back on. We're going through that normal part that have you turned it off and back on again? Well, now we have. We have now turned it off, and we have now turned it back on, and hopefully that will play a little nicer for all of us that are working here. Well, now I've got my head in the way. Let's change this around a bit so that I can show you and get us back to this screen. There we go. Now we can do another question. So there's our performance-based question. Hopefully you were able to get something out of that performance-based question that we had today. I now have some multiple choice questions for you. And this one's very timely. I was reading Reddit today in the CompTIA subreddit, and a number of people were talking about the fact that there were a lot of questions on the exam that had to do with printers. And it seems like it's an overwhelming number. But in reality, there's really not a huge section of the exam that's all printers, but there's certainly printer questions that you will run into on the exam. So I have a printer question for you. And this printer question that we have here is the one, it's more of a visual type of question. So those of you on the podcast, I'll try to explain what we're looking at. Here is the question. It says a user has opened a help desk ticket regarding this printer issue associated with the laser printer connected to the network. Which of these would be the most likely reason for this issue? And what we have is a Windows printer test page that's on the screen, and we can read everything that's on this test page. It's all in plain English. It says, congratulations, if you can read this information, you've correctly installed your PDF converter, blah, blah, blah. It has all the printing information that's there. But you'll notice it has a line that goes from the top of the page all the way down to the bottom. It's kind of 3/4 of the way over is just a black line that is on the page. That must be the issue that they are referring to. So users open a help desk ticket. That is, regarding this printer issue associated with the laser printer connected to the network, which of these would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be a clogged print cartridge? Would it be a faulty fuser? Would it be a scratched photosensitive drum? Would it be the incorrect printer driver? Or would it be the cleaning process is faulty? Those are your 5 options. Would it be a clogged print cartridge, a faulty fuser, a scratched photosensitive drum, an incorrect printer driver, or the cleaning process is faulty? Those are your 5 options to be able to step through. If you think you know what the correct answer is, feel free to go to professormesser.com/QA and fill in your answer right there. Please, again, no answering in the chat room. We're going to make it so that we're all going to take a guess. And if you don't know the answer, you should take a guess. Taking a guess is really your best choice. What we believe on the exam is that you get credit if you get an answer right. You get points if you get an answer right. If you get an answer wrong, you don't get any points. But the point is that they don't take points away from you for a wrong answer, which is pretty useful. That means that you can take a guess on the exam and there's no penalty for taking a guess. The only possible thing that can happen if you take a guess is you can get some points out of it. That's a bonus. So never leave a question blank on the exam. Before you submit the exam, make sure that every question is answered. And they will show you a summary page before you submit your test, showing you what you put in as the answer on every single question. If any of those are blank, make sure you go in and at least answer a question. Somebody said in something I was reading, answer C for certified. That's what you should answer for those. So make sure you go through and have a look at what those possible things are. Let's see how we did with this question. A user has opened a help desk ticket regarding this printing issue associated with the laser printer connected to the network. Which of these would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be a clogged print cartridge? Would it be a faulty fuser, a scratched photosensitive drum, an incorrect printer driver, or the cleaning process is faulty? 45% of you chose a scratched photosensitive drum. Not quite a majority, but that's the highest number that we have in this list. 22% of you said that the cleaning process is faulty. 19% said it's an incorrect printer driver. 11% said it's a faulty fuser, and then a paltry 3% said it's a clogged print cartridge. As you were stepping through this was the one you would need to know about. So if you run into this issue with bad output, here's your page on the printer with this big line down the page, you're going to need to start troubleshooting what this happens to be. And when we're dealing with a laser printer, specifically in this case, it was a laser printer in the question, then we need to have a look. If we're seeing a streak or a blur down the page, something that is just a single line that's going down the page, being able to check the photosensitive drum is your issue. And that will be one that you'll find there's a scratch, and that single scratch will be represented all the way down the page as the drum is simply rotating that scratch all the way down every single one of those. That is the problem with this particular printer. So we need to replace the photosensitive drum that happens to be there. In some laser printers, the photosensitive drum is part of the toner cartridge. So replacing the toner cartridge would effectively fix this problem. On some laser printers, the photosensitive drum and the toner cartridge are 2 different things. So replacing a toner cartridge on those printers will not fix your problem. You have to replace the photosensitive drum. So you have to make sure you know what kind of laser printer you're working with and the way that it operates. I would say the vast majority of laser printers probably are an all-in-one, where both the drum and the toner cartridge are together, but they're not always that way. So make sure you know what you're running into when you run into those situations. That means that the 47% of you that chose scratched photosensitive drum, that is the right answer. That's the one that you would run into with this problem. The cleaning process is usually the last process. We consider it to be the last process on the laser printer. The cleaning process would probably show some ghosting, or we would see some residual parts of the page printing again on other parts of the page. So the cleaning process is not our issue in this circumstance. 17% of you said an incorrect printer driver. An incorrect printer driver, we would expect to see some other type of information. There might be we're not able to read anything on the page, or we might happen to see letters or words that are not coming out the way we would expect, or they're in a different part of the page than what we were expecting. In this case, I was showing you a printer test page, so there really is the single thing we are working with is the printer driver on our computer. So that's the one you would run into. You can do your testing with the printer driver that way, but that output looked fine. The only difference was the line down the page. So in that case, I would say your printer driver is just fine. There's something else associated with it. A faulty fuser would mean that after the page was printed, we would be able to run our finger over the page and you'll find the toner was not melted to the page. It's not fastened there. And then, of course, at that point, the toner gets everywhere if it's a faulty fuser. And then lastly, a clogged print cartridge. Clogged print cartridges are on an inkjet, and we were talking specifically here about a laser printer. That means your only possible answer here is option C, the scratched photosensitive drum, and 48% of you got that one right. Let's do another one. I've got a question here that is asking about mobile phones. That seems to be a popular topic on the exam. This question asks, a system administrator has been asked to configure email connectivity on a mobile phone. The email provider documentation requires port TCP 993 to be open to receive mail. Which protocol should be configured on the phone? So a system administrator has been asked to configure email connectivity on a mobile phone. The email provider documentation requires port TCP 993 to be open to receive mail. Which protocol should be configured on the phone? Should it be SNMP, IMAP-S, POP, PGP, or SMTP? Those are your 5 options. It's SNMP, IMAP-S, POP, PGP, and SMTP. All real things. I didn't make up any of those. Those are real protocols. In fact, all of them are real protocols on a network. You could run all 5 of those protocols on a mobile phone as well. So this is one where you do have to know the answer. If you think you do know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. You can lock in what you think the answer happens to be. A lot of the questions on the exam are going to be scenarios like this, where you're in a position where you have to solve a problem, you have to resolve an issue, you have to understand the issue that's presented to you, and then react to that particular issue. It's not one where they're asking simple trivia questions. This is, in many ways, this question is kind of a trivia question if you break it out, but the questions on the exam are going to be much more of a story. They're going to be a scenario, and you have to be able to understand the scenario and then react accordingly to be able to do that. So lock in your answer. Go to professormesser.com/QA. No Googling. Stop your Google. I can see you. Stop the Googling. Do not Google parts of the question. You won't have Google available on your exam when you sit down anyway. There's no internet access when you sit down to take your exam, so Googling isn't going to help you when you're in the room. And of course here, you don't get anything for getting questions right or wrong other than your own personal knowledge. There you go. You get something out of the deal, I guess. Let's see how we did with this question. I'll click the How Do We Do button, and you can see 52 or 53% of us say it's IMAP-S. 22% said SMTP. 18% said POP. We've got 6% that said SNMP. And 3% that said PGP. So this would be one we do need to know about. It was TCP port 993 that should have tipped us off about receiving email on our mobile phone. There's a lot of different protocols that you can use to receive email. And the one that you will find probably the most common for a non-Outlook configuration is IMAP. It's the Internet Message Access Protocol. IMAP is usually running over TCP 143. That's the port number that it uses, but hopefully you're not using that port number, or hopefully your internet service provider only has that port number available to serve SSL's version of IMAP, IMAP-S, which is the IMAP protocol with encryption turned on. You never want to receive email messages in the clear from your email server. In fact, that most internet service providers these days just won't allow you to do that. They will either redirect port 143 so that it also supports IMAP-S, or of course, they'll just make available IMAP-S, which runs over port number TCP 993. This information comes directly from the 220-1001 Exam Objectives, Section 1.6. My video that describes this is the video called Configuring Email on Mobile Devices. What could be more straightforward than that particular title? So IMAP is the right answer here. IMAP-S is really the most specific answer. And the 53% of you that chose B, IMAP-S, got this one absolutely right. Well done. The 17% of you chose POP, and POP or POP3, we sometimes will just call it POP, is the post office protocol. That's another common way to download messages and be able to receive them on your mobile phone. It's probably a less common way. You will sometimes see devices that will still use POP or POP3, but TCP 993 is not POP, and that's the real message that we were trying to get through with this question, is that TCP 993. SMTP is a common protocol used for the simple mail transfer protocol that's commonly used for outgoing traffic, outgoing email. You're sending email. And that SMTP, the 21% of you chose that one, but we were looking to receive emails. We were open to receiving mail on that mobile phone, so SMTP. And in fact, of course, the TCP 993 was the real hint there. We should have been able to map that back to IMAP-S immediately. SNMP, if you recall from the first rewind question, the Simple Network Management Protocol is used to retrieve statistics and information about availability from switches, routers, operating systems, other infrastructure components on your network. And then lastly, PGP, which is an encryption protocol commonly associated with email, but it does not have to be associated with email. And that is not the protocol that uses TCP 993. Your only option here is IMAP-S. So that is the right answer. 54% of you did choose IMAP-S. Well done with that. There's so much information in these exams. It is just full of details. And if you've gone through my 220-1001 and my 220-1002 videos, it's almost overwhelming, the amount of information. These are very, very broad exams. None of these go into a lot of detail. Some of these topics go into more detail than others. But there's so much information, everything from networking to security to mobile devices to operating systems, and of course, being able to troubleshoot all of those technologies. Of course, I recommend you go through every single one of the study groups and all of my videos and take plenty of notes. Having notes on this is going to help you a lot when it comes time for you to be able to take this exam. But of course, it's nice to have everything in one place. And that's why I have created course notes for my 220-1001 and my 220-1002 exams. My course notes will show you everything that I have. In fact, I'm going to bring up my course notes here so you can really see my 2-page course notes here. Get rid of my thumbnails and allow you to get a view of what these course notes look like. I have summarized every single bit of information from all of my videos. All of this is detailed, and it is summarized in section 1.1 of laptop hardware. All the mobile device information we were talking about, all the details about protocols and the breakdown of all the port numbers, it's all in there. All of these course notes are available. I have course notes for the 220-1001 and the 220-1002 exam, so you can look at both of those. I even have physical versions. If you don't like the digital version in the PDF, you can purchase a book version. It's a softback book, what they call perfect bound, like you would have with a softback book, and it is full color in here. So this is a book that is high quality, nice glossy on the front, and then high quality matte paper that's on the inside. It's exactly the same information as the digital version, but some people like to have one that is something that's a physical book. And if you purchase the physical book version, I'll give you the digital version for free. So while you're waiting for this to be shipped to you, you'll be able to download the digital version and you'll have something to study from immediately. That might help you out when you're ready for the exam. It doesn't replace your book. It doesn't replace the videos. It doesn't replace hands-on or any QA. It's just another tool that you could use to help get in your head all of those details you need. Get it really solidified into your brain, all of the specific information that you might want to run into. Have a look at those. You'll find the details at professormesser.com/1000 notes. They are $20 a piece. Every penny of this goes back to keeping the website up and running and keeping the lights on and allowing me to do more of these live streams. So thank you for your support. We really would not be able to do this without your help. So thank you for your ongoing support with these, for my A+, my Network Plus, my Security Plus exams, and the course notes. So helpful to have that. Let's do some more Q&A. Here's a Q&A question directly from the CEO. The CEO of a company would like to block all known malicious data as it enters the network from the internet. Which of the following should be used to provide this capability? Well, we do have some options available. Those options are syslog, authentication server, IPS, endpoint management server, and SIM. Those are your 5 different options for this. It's syslog, authentication server, IPS, endpoint management server, and SIM. That's SIEM. That's how you say that, as a SIM. The CEO wants to block all known malicious data as it enters the network from the internet. Which of the following should be used to provide this capability? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. And you can, of course, go through all of those details to find the specifics of what could be used to provide that capability. That may be something that is helpful to you. For those of you looking at the course notes, you're thinking, hey, something's not in the course notes I thought should be there. Because what is in the course notes comes directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. If it's not in the exam objectives, it's not going to be in my videos. If it's in the exam objectives, it absolutely is in my videos. So if you're trying to figure out, hey, I was expecting to see something there, and you didn't see it, that may be it. Everybody got to see me coughing on the picture in a picture. It was that malicious software that was coming into the network that was causing me to cough. What's up with that? So let's have a look at what you thought the answer was. The CEO of a company would like to block all known malicious data as it enters the network from the internet. Which of the following should be used to provide this capability? We have 41% of you that chose IPS. Really struggling with this voice. That's what you get for a live display. Whenever you have a problem, we'll just cut to the title page and see if we can solve the issue. 40% of you have chosen IPS as the answer to this. 26% said authentication server. 19% said endpoint management server. 12% said a SIM, and 3% said syslog. Well, we already talked about syslog today, so perhaps that helped some folks. That's one of the things you should also do on the exam, is as you go through the exam, there will be things you recognize that, oh, we talked about that earlier, and now I remember what that is. That helped me out with a different question that might have helped a number of you out with this particular question. Hopefully it did. This would be something that could help you. Let's see what the answer happens to be. If we're trying to block known malicious software from coming into the network, then we want to use an IPS, an intrusion protection system or intrusion prevention system. You could see it listed as either of those, or an IDS, an intrusion detection system, which doesn't necessarily block anything. That's why these days, if you see one of these technologies in use, it almost always is an IPS that is blocking known malicious software, protects buffer overflows, cross-site scripting, and other known vulnerabilities. The known vulnerabilities is the important part. The IPS has to be aware of what it would expect to see coming across the network to be able to block it from coming across the network. Many of the types of exploits that would take advantage of these vulnerabilities are things that you can identify coming across the network, but not 100% of them are. So you do have to have different types of technologies in different places. That's why we still need anti-malware software on people's workstations. We still need IPSs. We still need firewalls. We still need those technologies to be able to handle the many different types of malicious code, software, and attacks that will come into our corporate networks. In this scenario, though, we had a very specific requirement. That requirement was that we need to block all known malicious data as it enters the network. No malicious software on this list. The best option is indeed the intrusion prevention or intrusion protection system. Those are solutions that are these days very commonly integrated into the firewall itself, but we often still refer to it as a separate entity, as a separate IPS. If we go through this list, endpoint management server doesn't actually block anything. The server itself, the endpoint software on someone's endpoint can certainly block software, but the endpoint management server may not actually be managing a malicious software, anti-malware software. It may be managing some other type of service on that endpoint. That is not what those devices are designed to do. They're designed to manage the endpoints, not actually block any malicious software. The authentication server that you would find, 24% of you chose authentication server. If you're logging into the network and you're logging in with a username and password, or you're connecting to a switch and you have to authenticate, or you're connecting to a VPN and you have to authenticate, that is all done with an authentication server so that it's able to check your username and password. Checking usernames and passwords does nothing to stop malicious software. So authentication server would not be the right answer either. A SIEM, your security information and event manager, is really designed to consolidate or view a consolidated set of logs and be able to present dashboards, reports, and other details about what it found in those log files. And ultimately, the SIEM doesn't block anything. It may report and tell you that you were able to identify certain types of malicious software that came into the network. And it does that usually by looking at the log files that came on the IPS. So the SIEM is going to help you for reporting, but not for blocking anything. And lastly, syslog. We already know syslog was the protocol used to consolidate those log files to begin with. It doesn't actually block anything. However, your best option here, and the only option for this question, is indeed C, IPS. 44% of you chose IPS, and that is indeed the right answer for this one. Let's get another question in. I've got another multiple choice question for you. You like RAID? Well, good. I have a RAID question for you. The question asks, one of the drives in a RAID 1 array have failed. Which of the following would be the best way to restore this array to full functionality? And we have 4 options for you. Should we replace the bad drive and restore from backup? Should we replace the bad drive and resync the array? Should we replace all drives and restore from backup? Or should we replace all drives and resync the array? Even though I said a resync the array, that means and resync the array. There's always something in the live stream. I missed that one. But hopefully you're able to work through my grammatical errors. Let's go through these one more time. One of the drives in a RAID 1 array have failed. Which of the following would be the best way to restore this array to full functionality? Would it be replace the bad drive and restore from backup? Would it be replace the bad drive and resync the array? Would it be to replace all drives and restore from backup? Or would it be to replace all drives and resync the array? Those are your 4 options for restoring this array to full functionality. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can answer that question right there. Hopefully you're familiar enough with RAID, and you should really go through all of the different RAID types that are in the CompTIA exam objectives and answer this question. If you lose one of the drives, how do you restore the array to full functionality? You should be able to answer that question for every RAID type. It's not always the same answer. So make sure you're familiar with what those options might be as you're stepping through them. Go through this list too and see if you can figure out for RAID 1 which one it might be in this list of 4 things. Hopefully you've run into this question before. You're familiar enough with RAID 1 to be able to have run into this question before. It might help you as you're going through this and trying to figure out the details. Let's see how we did with this. I'm going to flip us over and let's see how we do. Well, 62% of you said to replace the bad drive and resync the array. And then we've got 31% of you that said replace the bad drive and restore from backup. Not sure. We've got sort of a mixed bag there. 7%, only 7% said replace all the drives and restore from backup. And then 0% said replace all drives and resync the array. Nobody thinks you should replace all the drives and resync the array. So it was pretty clear that last option wasn't there. RAID 1 is an interesting scenario. In its most minimal form with RAID 1, we have 2 drives. You have to have at least 2 drives for RAID 1. You can often run RAID 1 with more than 2, but it needs these 2 drives because we are duplicating every bit of information across both of those drives on RAID 1. RAID 1 we often call mirroring because we're effectively taking everything that's on one drive and we are duplicating or mirroring it to another drive. That means that if you want to store a terabyte of data, we need 2 terabytes of storage space. If you want to have 5 terabytes of storage, you need 10 total terabytes of hard drives because you have a mirror of information. And this can really, of course, make it go up, up, up. The number of drives we would need would go up, up, up. Whenever you lose one of those drives, though, because you are mirrored, this is great. We lost a drive. Let's say one of these drives goes away completely. It's okay. We have an exact duplicate on the other drive. Now, what happens when we need to restore it is that we take out the bad drive, we put in the new drive, and almost all RAID arrays will realize you've replaced the drive. We now have a new drive in the system, and it will prompt you and say, would you like to resync now everything to this new drive? Because you're still up and running, the RAID array understands that we just need to copy everything back over now. That copy process obviously can take some time. You can spend quite a bit of time waiting for everything to copy. Obviously, the smaller amounts of storage space will copy over faster, but eventually everything gets copied over, you're resynced up again, and now everything can continue to work. You're now prepared if any one of those drives fails again. And indeed, that is the right answer. Those of you that chose replace the bad drive and resync the array, 62% of you chose that option. That is the right option. That's what you should do for RAID 1. For option A, 31% of you said to replace the bad drive and restore from backup. But with RAID 1, when you lost that drive, you didn't lose any data. Nothing happened with any of the data. You were still up and running. In fact, I've gone into situations where I've gone into a site and the site server lost one of those drives in their RAID array and lost half of the array effectively and had been running for months on one drive. Had no idea that the RAID array was broken. So we pulled the bad drive out, put it in, resynced, and of course they were protected. They had no clue that they were running with just one drive. Now, obviously, backups were being taken during that time as well because, of course, RAID is not backup. You still have to do backups even if you have a RAID array. So we could have recovered from the backup. You just don't want to be in that situation. That's why you have the RAID array to begin with, of course, to be able to avoid any of that from happening. If you are watching this video for continuing education unit credit, one of the things you may want to do is receive a digitally signed email from me that says you must have watched this. You can use that for continuing education unit credit. And to do that, you have to follow these instructions. You go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, and on that top or bottom is a link for Contact Us. That really is Contact Me. Sends me a note. Takes you to a form. You put in your name. You put in your email address. It wants a subject line or a title for this particular message. Please put in that this is the July A+ 220-1001 study group. And it's also helpful if in that subject line you put the super secret code word of the month, which is RAID 1. Somewhere put RAID 1. You could put the RAID 1 in the message block as well, as long as it's something very obvious that I'm able to see. Don't hide it in a sentence somewhere. It gets very difficult to read through all of these. And you can, of course, put anything else you'd like to as well. I read through every single one of these. I'm not able to respond back to every single one of these, but I do read everything that's sent to me. I read every comment that's on any of my YouTube videos. I read everything that's sent to me on Twitter. I read everything that's put into the Contact Us link or in any of the CEU requests that I get. So I try to keep track of what everybody's asking about, what you're interested in. And although I'm not able to answer all of those, I do read them, just so you're absolutely aware of them. If you do that, I will probably in the next week or so be able to turn that around and send you back a digitally signed email that says you must have watched this because you followed those instructions exactly right and put in the super secret code word of the day. And that's exactly the way you should make that happen. So be sure to go through those. Let's do another question. I've got one for you. We've got time for another one. This is a question that reminds me of what you could run into on the exam because it's a long one. These are not uncommon on the exam. So here's the scenario we've run into. The question asks, Jack works for a company that is contracted with a cloud-based service provider for disaster recovery. If a disaster occurs, the cloud-based service will provide CPU, memory, and network capacity. Jack will be responsible for installing the operating system and applications during the recovery phase. Which of the following would best describe this cloud model? So that's a big scenario. We'll read through that again. Let's go through the answers first. The possible answers are PAAS, private, SAAS, hybrid, and IaaS. I know I'm saying them differently than probably you're expecting to hear, but that's on purpose. So let's go through this question one more time. The question asks, Jack works for a company that is contracted with a cloud-based service provider for disaster recovery. If a disaster occurs, the cloud-based service will provide CPU, memory, and network capacity. Jack will be responsible for installing the operating system and applications during the recovery phase. Which of the following would best describe this cloud model? Is it PaaS, private, SaaS, hybrid, or IaaS? Those are your 5 different options for all 5 of those. Hopefully, you're able to parse through this very wordy question and get down to what they're asking. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the questions on your exam will have these stories. They'll have these scenarios. They'll have a lot of different options available. So make sure that you're able to go through every part of this and read through it. If reading is not your forte, you may want to brush up on some of these technologies and be able to read through them very, very quickly. If you think you know what the answer of this is, please do not put the answer in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA and put your answer in right there. Maybe you've just now gotten through reading all of the question. It's a long question. I barely fit it on the screen. I really didn't fit on the screen. My head is there in the way. So hopefully you're able to figure out what Jack has done here for this service provider and being able to work through this. I see a number of you are locking in your answer over on the other side. I haven't looked yet. I try not to look at what people have answered unless I'm just insanely curious about what you've chosen. In this case, I like it to be a surprise when I go back to that page to see what you were able to put in there and being able to work through all of those different pieces. Hopefully it's one when you were trying to flip through it and figure out the details. You know what the options are, and you can kind of get rid of some of the others and being able to work through it. Let's see how we did with this one. I'm going to click the how do we do, and we're all going to find out at the same time that 48% of you chose IaaS as the answer. But we're a little torn. 22% said hybrid, 17% said PaaS, and 12% said SaaS. So let's have a step through all of these. Obviously, we commonly call this SaaS, PaaS, although we commonly do call it IaaS because it just doesn't make much sense to call it something else. And private and hybrid are the correct pronunciations. I got those pretty close, didn't I? The answer here, though, was very specific. Jack is responsible for installing the applications and the operating systems. All we're really getting from the provider is the infrastructure. So your answer in this case is going to be infrastructure as a service. You can also see this referred to as HAAS, hardware as a service, because that's effectively what they're giving you are these virtual machines or physical hardware machines, and they don't have an operating system, they don't have applications, they don't have anything but the hardware you need to the specifications you want and the network connectivity that's important to get everything back up and running. So that means Jack is still responsible for making sure that you're able to install the apps, install the operating systems. You've got to do everything with the management for these devices. If there's software upgrades that need to occur, Jack has got to do the software upgrades. If there's operating system changes that need to be made, Jack has to do the operating system changes. That is one of the important parts of infrastructure as a service, is that you're the one that has to manage this. So a lot in the chat room, people are saying, what about these new streaming video game services? Is that infrastructure as a service? It is not, because you aren't in charge of the Xbox or the PC workstation that's running this. You don't have control of the operating system. You don't have to install patches for Windows to make sure that your game is going to work properly. You just are given the software to make it work. That would be a software as a service, or as what they're calling is gaming as a service. It is streaming as a service in that scenario. They're taking the idea and sort of extending it to be able to do that and have all of those pieces there. So infrastructure as a service, those of you that answered E, IaaS, 47% of you got that one absolutely correct. That is the right answer. 20% said hybrid. A hybrid cloud model is one where some of the cloud model is in a public cloud, some of it is in a private cloud. Well, in this scenario, we're going completely to a public cloud to provide, or it could be all in a private cloud to provide this backup. There's no mention in the question about a public or private side of it. So we can assume that all of this is going to be on the same side. There was certainly no mention of separating it. So we probably would not best describe the cloud model as hybrid. We also would not best describe it as private because it might not be private. This might all be a public model. To have this here, these applications and operating systems may be customer-facing applications and operating systems. So that's important too. The platform as a service is kind of a middle ground between infrastructure and software as a service, where they will give you all the building blocks you need to build your own applications, and you simply, like Legos, put together the building blocks. Software as a service is one where you simply log in and use the software. You don't have to worry about programming it. You don't have to do any development work. You don't have to manage the operating system patches. If you're using Google Mail or Yahoo Mail or any of those web-based email services, that's software as a service. You don't have to do anything about any of the infrastructure, any of the operating system, or any of the application. You simply just log in and use it. That is software as a service, being able to work through that. Let's see if we've got time. We do have time for another question. Let's get another question in here. And our question asks, Jacob, a user in the accounting department, is using Mac OS as his primary desktop. Each time Jacob launches or closes an application, the cursor changes to a spinning weight cursor for 30 seconds. Which of these would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be that the hard drive is faulty? Would it be the network is congested? Would it be that the video resolution is too low? Would it be that the power supply is faulty? Or would it be that the applications are buggy? Those are the 5 options. Jacob is a user in the accounting department. He's using Mac OS as his primary desktop. Each time Jacob launches or closes an application, the cursor changes to a spinning weight cursor for 30 seconds. Which of these would be the most likely reason for this issue? Those are your 5 options, which are the hard drive is faulty, the network is congested, the video resolution is too low, the power supply is faulty, or the applications are buggy. Which one would it be? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. You can lock in your answer for being able to do that. So hopefully you know what this answer is. If you've ever worked with Mac OS and had to work through any of troubleshooting problems with this, it's a good one to be familiar with. See if you happen to know what this one happens to be. A lot of you are locking in these answers. That's why I think maybe a number of you have run into this before. This is one where a lot of people don't realize that Mac OS and Linux are pretty large on the exam. There's a huge section of Linux command line commands. You have to know a good bit about Mac OS and the Linux operating system and some of the tools and utilities used. It's not as much as knowing Windows on the exam, but this is one because there's so much Mac OS and there's so much Linux out on these company infrastructures. It's nice to have a little bit of that knowledge in your back pocket. So it's important that that's on the A+ exam as well. Let's see how we did with this answer. Let's click the How Do We Do button. And we're a little torn. 49% said the hard drive is faulty. 32% said the applications are buggy. 17% said the network is congested. Only 3% said the video resolution is too low. And 0% said the power supply is faulty. Well, that little spinning weight cursor is what we often call the spinning ball of death. That is what it shows up in your Mac OS desktop. Your normal cursor, the arrow cursor that you're moving around the screen, suddenly turns into this spinning ball that goes around and around on your screen like that. And suddenly you aren't able to use the operating system because you're not able to choose anything. While that ball is spinning, you have no control of anything in your operating system. Now, on the operating systems we use these days, that would not be normal. Normally, you would have some type of control of the operating system at that point. Usually, you can open and close and work with other apps and move back and forth, and there's never a time when you would be prevented from interacting with that operating system. So it has to be something pretty bad. Now, it could be an application bug. That is certainly one of the reasons. You would open up an app because of a bug. That app would cause this particular spinning ball of death, the spinning weight cursor. It could be bad hardware. As you're trying to open up some of software that's on that system, the bad hardware is causing the system to hang up, and you're getting the spinning weight cursor while you're waiting for that issue to resolve. And lastly, maybe slow paging to disk. The operating system has to wait. Maybe you're low on memory and you're doing a lot of paging to disk back and forth. Maybe that's a concern that you would have one of those. Now, in this particular set of answers, two of those answers are here. The hard drive is faulty and the applications are buggy. Kind of correlate back to two answers here, which is bad hardware and an application bug. So which one would it be? Well, now we have to read the scenario and really understand what it's asking, because each time Jacob launches or closes an application, every single time with every single application, he has to sit there and wait 30 seconds for something to happen. Now, I've used bad apps on every single type of operating system you can think of, and certainly opening and using a bad app can cause a delay. But I've never used an operating system where every single application was a bad app, thankfully. So our scenario here would probably not be that every single one of those applications are buggy. We would want to choose the most likely reason for this issue, which was the question. And the most likely reason would be A, the hard drive is faulty. We try to access information on the drive. We need to launch those applications, and every single time we're having a delay that's so bad that as it's retrying access to that drive, the operating system is effectively hanging up and waiting for that particular function to finish so that we can finally continue on. So the spinning ball of death, the spinning weight cursor, that beach ball that shows up, is one that is annoying and it can create problems. But this is one where we very often can regain control of the operating system and be able to use it. That's not always the case, by the way. There may be cases where it just spins forever. Maybe the hard drive's finally gone bad. It's never coming back. We have to restart the system and try to find the way around it. So for this question that was asking the most likely reason for this issue, it would be the hard drive is faulty. Normally, if the network is congested, it does not hang up your local computer. Obviously, the applications using the network are going to run slowly, but they're not going to cause the operating system itself to stop responding to you. We've got video resolution too low. Video resolution has nothing to do with the spinning weight cursor. A power supply being faulty is probably going to have your system turn off. You're probably not going to be able to use it. You won't even get to a point where there's a spinning weight cursor. There's no cursor. Suddenly, it goes black and doesn't work at all. Fortunately, the only time I've ever run into these types of issues is with bad hardware, which no matter what operating system you use, you're going to be in cases where your hardware will go bad. That's a universal truth. Whether you're running Mac OS, Windows, Linux, or any other OS, eventually you'll run into some bad hardware. That's what you will find out. If you're ever running Mac OS or anything else, there will be something specific with that operating system that will give you a clue that that hardware is indeed going bad. And that is the example here with the spinning weight cursor, is that we got a bad hard drive. We need to back up that system immediately and get a new hard drive, or perhaps put an SSD in that system. That would be nice. We've got all of this that we went through today. Every single one of these questions, by the way, come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. And on every single one of those slides, you saw at the bottom, I put the exact video that this content came from. So you can always go back to understand why that might be. These objectives are available for download. You should absolutely get your hands on these objectives. They will tell you everything you need to know to be able to pass these exams. Everything's in there. You can download them. I have a link that goes directly to CompTIA. That goes to professormesser.com/objectives. That link will take you over to the CompTIA website where you can download these objectives and be able to use and step through every single possible option you have available. Well, we went through an hour plus of A+ 1001 questions today. Stop back by in a couple days on July 11th if you're here live. That's the August view. We have some coming up in August as well, but on Thursday we're going to do the 1002 study group. So we'll go through operating systems, security, and more troubleshooting on that particular study group. So stop back by in a couple days. We'd love to go through this again with you and have some fun going back and forth with the Q&A. And we do one of these every month. So as you can see, on August the 13th and August the 15th of next month, we'll do more of the A+, the 1001 and the 1002 respectively for those two. And if you are, of course, watching this on well past August, you can always have a look at our calendar at professormesser.com/calendar, and you know exactly when that next event is going to be. Well, although the Q&A is done, we'll open up the phone lines and you'll be able to go to the phone lines. You can call in. You can put questions in the chat room. We'll do Q&A until you're just tired of it. Don't forget about the daily Twitter pop quiz question. You can find it at professormesser.com/Twitter. And, of course, YouTube at professormesser.com/YouTube. I want to put more of those pop quiz questions on Instagram. So if you're an Instagram user, go to professormesser.com/Instagram. We're going to try to put one out there today, I think, as a trial. Lori, my marketing manager, has been working on a new format so you can get a question and then you can swipe and see what the answer is. We're going to try that in Instagram today. So you may want to join me on Instagram. Go to professormesser.com/Instagram for that. Don't forget about the A+ notes. They're available at professormesser.com/1000 notes. And, of course, check the calendar for the next event. Stick around for the next hour. We'll open up the phone lines. We'll have any question you'd like. Doesn't have to be about A+, could be about anything you'd like. We'll be able to go through all of those. Thanks for being here this time. We appreciate you joining us. We'll see you next time on the A+ Study Group. Okay, let's see if I can get my act together to be able, there we go, I'm back, to be able to answer your phone calls. Of course, you can, before I get the phone calls up and running, you're welcome to call in, but I am looking at the chat as well. That's at professormesser.com/live, and any reasonable questions will certainly be answered there. I won't say every question will possibly be answered, but any reasonable question would be answered. This takes me a moment to call into my own show because all of my Q&A is done in the cloud. So if you would just bear with me a moment, I'm going to call in to my own show, and then we will call in and have a look at what you want to talk about. So we have this coming through. Well, you're welcome. I'm going to type in a few things on my side, and it says,
enter your 6-digit PIN number.
I will. That's redundant. And now if I put in my 6-digit PIN number,
welcome.
See, now I'm in my own cloud-based front end. And you're welcome to call in as well. You can put messages and questions in the live event chat that is on my website if you're watching this live, or you can call in. There's a toll-free number in the continental United States at 855-785-7545. That's 855-785-RJ45. We've also got call in that you could do for free anywhere in the world by putting a +1 at the beginning. You can use Skype, and there's no Skype minutes required for calling this toll-free number. It is +1 855-785-7545. You're welcome to call in, be able to take your calls there as well. I don't ever plan to do other study sessions with other people. Folks in the chat room are thinking having to bring other people in for the study sessions. No plans at the moment. The format isn't one that really lends itself well for other folks, but I guess you never know. We'll certainly can always change things in the future, I guess. There's so many moving parts here. I am constantly, so for those of you that have sort of watched some of the views in the pre-show, there is audio going on, there's video switching, I've got your questions on the screen. This laptop here that you really can't see the screen is the one showing you the slides. I've got the chat right here, and all of this kind of has to happen. I couldn't imagine throwing one more thing into it and trying to juggle all of those things. So hopefully we'll be able just to keep doing what we're doing here and not have the whole system fall apart. I think it's the best thing I can offer. Let's get the phone lines ready to go. I need to get my coffee out of the way. I need to turn up the phone lines, my potentiometer, and let's go the 614 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hello, Professor.
Hello. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
This is Stanley calling from Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, welcome, Ohio. What can we do for you?
It's not clear to me yet why the last question could not be a faulty application.
Okay. Let's step through that real quick. One of the question we were asking, in fact, I still have it on my screen. Your timing is perfect because I've not changed this on my screen. Let me readjust things on my screen and get my big head back in the view. So the question was that Jacob was in the accounting department, but each time he launched or closed an application, the cursor changed to a spinning weight cursor. Now, technically, I guess if you happen to have 10 different applications and all 10 of those applications happen to be buggy, I suppose that having a bad application, a buggy application, could be the right answer. But if you're familiar at all with working with computers, you know that thankfully your job is not that bad. You're never in a situation where every single application you would ever start on your computer would be buggy. So thankfully, in this case, Jacob did not have 20 or 30 buggy apps. His problem was that he had just a bad hard drive. You would not expect every single application on an operating system to be buggy, although there were some Mac haters in the chat room. I guess they thought every Mac app was buggy, but in reality, that's certainly not the case.
Okay. That's a reasonable now. Because I was like, why would it not be the hard drive? But I got a point. It's clear. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I appreciate the call, and thanks for asking for the clarification. That always helps too, because I want to be sure we've stepped through it. Sometimes I will write these, because I write every single one of these questions all the way through. Every month you get a new question, new set of questions. We aren't repeating questions. I'm not pulling these from a third party. I write all new questions every single month. So sometimes I get it wrong. Sometimes I write questions that are not as clear as they should be. I've tried to get better and better and better at this as the years have gone on. So if there's ever a question, you're looking at a question wondering, couldn't that be different? I'll give you credit if it is, because absolutely, it could be that I wrote it wrong. You never know. We'll go to the next caller. Hello, caller. Thanks for being there. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Josh from Virginia.
Welcome, Josh. What can we do for you?
Just got a couple of questions. First one, I know you mentioned about command line, being familiar with that. I have went through your, now this is, my focus is on 1001 for right now. I have went through your sections, and I have seen some command line prompts, but as far as, Windows go, now for 1001 series, do we need to be familiarized with Mac OS as well? Because that seems like it's more towards 1002. Correct me if I'm wrong, please.
No, and it's well detailed in the 1001 exam objectives and the 1002 exam objectives, what types of things you would be expected to know. So the 1001 training course, if you look through those exam objectives, and I'm going to bring them up on the screen so that those others who are here and watching live can have a look at this as well. Here are the 1001 exam objectives. Let me even get rid of the thumbnails, and we'll go to a 2-page view. There we go. And the 1001 objectives, there is not a lot in here that have anything to do with command line. So there aren't a lot of command line options in here. When you get into scenarios at the end where it's hardware and troubleshooting, some of the things that will come up in troubleshooting will be things that you have to resolve, and some of the only ways to resolve it happen to be some command line options. For example, having a failure to boot, for example, could possibly be an issue with the operating system and the boot sector. So you have to know how to rebuild the boot sector to be able to do that. Mobile, printers, wireless networks, most of those are not related to command lines. And as you've seen in the 1000 series exam objectives, as I'm flipping through these, there are no other mentions of any type of command lines we would have to know. So the amount of command lines that's here now, very, very, very limited. It's almost always specific to getting a system up and running and being able to troubleshoot boot type issues, which of course maybe one or two specific command lines you would have to know. Now let's contrast that with the 1002 exam objectives. Let me bring those up. I will bring up the 1002 on my screen, and you'll see there is a significant difference between those exam objectives. For those of you that haven't gone through and looked at these exam objectives before, you may be surprised. You're looking at this screen and thinking, there's a lot of stuff on these exam objectives. There absolutely is. They are huge. These are the 1002 exam objectives. And if you look at just section 1.4 is an entire section with tons of command lines on it. I'm trying to make it so that you can see it on your screen. Let me go back to that specific one. All of these command line tools you're expected to know. These are just the Microsoft command line tools. ipconfig, ping, traceroute. These are diskpart, GP update, xcopy, netuse, and more. Just plenty of Microsoft command line tools. And then let's keep going, because over on the Linux side, you have all of these Linux commands you need to know: ls, grep, cd, shutdown, rm, chmod, ps, vi, kill, and more. Many more that are there. So you can see the difference between 1001 and 1002, significant when it comes to command lines. So make sure you're familiar with those types of commands that you would run into and what would be expected of you for those, because it is very different on the 1001, 1002. You can almost ignore the fact that command lines exist on the 1001, and when you get to 1002, spend all of your time working through command lines. It seems like it's almost overwhelming, the amount of command lines you need to know. It helps if you've got a little bit of hands-on that you can work from, because you're going to have to go through each one of those and understand them.
Right. Yep. I appreciate that. And another question I have, I know IPv4 and IPv6, that's, knowing the difference and all that good stuff. We have to know about that. Now, configuring those, are SOHO routers more as far as, putting in the IP address? Like, what kind of questions does, let's say, exam kind of ask or leans towards? Because I have learned the difference, but does one have to know how exactly, like, how one can go in and completely build it fresh? Like, I'm a bit confused on that as far as IPv4 and 6 go.
Fortunately, and I think this was probably a good move by CompTIA, in the 900 series exams and also in the 1000 series exams, the 901 and the 1001 specifically, they really changed the perspective of what someone is expected to know in the networking sections. And they changed it to be more of someone who has to administer the workstation. What do they need to know to get proper connectivity to the network? So you don't have to be a network administrator. You don't have to understand subnetting. You don't even have to break down and understand the details of how IP works and IP routing. All they really ask of you is, can you configure IP addressing on these devices, on your workstations, on your laptops, on your SOHO networks? and maybe even in a router or the wireless access point / router that you happen to be using. That's as far as it goes. So if you think of it from that perspective, you certainly have to be able to recognize an IPv4 address. You have to be able to recognize what an IPv6 address is, but you will not be asked to design a network addressing scheme. Someone else is going to do that. The network administrator is going to do that part. For the A+ exam, they're assuming that you're in charge of the workstation, and you should know everything you need to know to make sure that device can first connect to the network, which means you need to understand what an IP address is, what a subnet mask is, what a default gateway is, what your DNS settings are, and you need to know how to configure those. And then if those don't work, how do you troubleshoot that? What are the basics? What should you ping first? What should you ping second? If you use traceroute, will that help you? Those options and those commands to be able to do it are technically not even mentioned in the exam objectives for the 1001. They come up over in the troubleshooting section in the 5.0. There's a section for, let me bring this up on the screen, troubleshooting common wired and wireless networks. And that's where you might run into a question about limited connectivity, unavailable resources, no connectivity. You have to know the difference between an API-IPA address and a link local address. You have to understand what you do when you get an IP conflict. But even in that section, they don't go into a lot of command lines. So perhaps not even knowing ping is a requirement, although I think everybody should know what ping is, even if you're managing a workstation. Follow the lead of the exam objectives. If they're not going into detail, then you should not go into detail either. The exam most likely will not. And there's plenty of other things in the exam objectives that do go into detail, and you should certainly spend your time going into the things specifically mentioned rather than things that aren't mentioned at all in the exam objectives.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Professor, for what you do, and you have been big help. I plan on taking the first part of this, hopefully this Thursday. So I appreciate it.
Fantastic. Our best of luck to you, Josh.
Thank you.
That's always an important thing when you're looking at those exam objectives. And I tell people this all the time. Look at all this content that's on the exam objectives. Here's section 1.0 of the 1001. We'll go another page, another page, another page, another page. Really, this is 2 pages at a time, and another page. So everything that's in that list from section 1 to section 5, you should be able to go through each one of those and explain it to someone else. These are the exam objectives that you can find at professormesser.com/objectives. And that will take you right over to the CompTIA website where you can download these. Those objectives have everything. If you know everything that's listed in these objectives, you're going to do fine on your exam. Now, some people will tell you, well, you need to go outside the objectives. You need to learn these other topics, which can't hurt you. But from the experiences that I and others have had, CompTIA does not tend to go outside the scope of these objectives. And there's more than enough stuff to know in this list of objectives. So if you focus on the objectives, you're going to do fine. So that's my bit of advice anyway, to have that particular option there. Let's go back to phone lines. The 502 area code. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello.
Hello, caller.
Hello,
What's
sir.
your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, sir. My name is Raj. Although I have a Kentucky number, I live in Southern California.
Welcome, Raj. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Right. So I'm pretty sure you already mentioned this in so many other words, but in a nutshell, there's not going to be any carryover of 902 materials to 901 exam, which I have on the 18th.
The 901 and the 902 exams are, for the most part, very much their own independent certification exams. There's not a lot of overlap on the 902 from the 901 and vice versa. They used to be, back in the 800 series and prior, it used to be quite a bit of overlap. Like one exam would talk to you about the technology, and the next exam expected you to troubleshoot the technology. Where thankfully, in the 900 series, CompTIA changed that, and they tried to make each one of these exams their own self-contained entity. And going forward from that point, I've always recommended to people, focus on one exam at a time, learn everything you need to know, and what you're going to find is when you shift gears over to the other exam, you're not going to have to remember or have to worry about things that you were previously tested on, which I think is a better exam experience for everybody.
Right. I mean, I passed the 902 in 2018 November. So
there's very little you're going to find in the 901 exam that have to do with security. There's no detailed questions on the 901 exam about the Windows operating systems. None of those things you went through in the 902 are going to show up on your 901 and be expected to know it. Now, obviously, there's going to be questions about booting an operating system. There's going to be questions about using some of the technologies that those operating systems use, but they're not going to ask you about performance monitor and booting from Windows 7 and being able to use the Windows 7 desktop. Those will never show up on your 901.
Okay. And there going to be any command line prompt stuff to do?
As we just mentioned that earlier call, we kind of went through what could you possibly be asked at a command line on the 901. There's not much on the 901 exam that is command line oriented. A lot of your command line stuff was on the 902. So the Linux commands, the Mac OS commands, the Windows commands, they were all in the 902. Fortunately, you don't have any of those types of commands on the 901. Very, very limited as to what you would ever need to do at a command prompt. The best thing the most command prompty thing I can think on the 901 is it might ask you how to rebuild your boot configuration file. It might ask you how to rebuild a boot sector. Those are things you have to be able to do from the recovery console. And of course, the recovery console is a command line. But we're talking about maybe one command with 3 different options on it. So there's not a lot that you have to worry about there.
Okay. And just one last thing. So I appreciate all that you have done for us to become certified IT techs. And is there a way I can get in touch with you again outside of this call? Yeah, I have is there a number? No.
There's not a direct number, but if you go to the top or the bottom of my website, there's a contact us link that goes directly to me. So it says contact us. It's really contact me. So any messages, any questions, anything anyone needs, if you put a message in there, I will see anything that people put into that. It all comes directly to my phone. I get it instantly. So that's a great way if you have a question or there's something you need more clarification on, or just have a question like this one, like what should I expect to see on the exam? It just takes me a minute or two to fire off an email. I'm happy to do that.
Thank you very much, sir.
I appreciate the call. Good. Best of luck.
Thank you.
That's great. The challenge with being able to manage that, of course, is there are often a lot of email messages that come in. So I try to get back to every single one that I can. If you keep them short and succinct and concise and not a very broad question, it helps me a lot. You know, some people say, what should I do in my career? Well, that's a conversation. That's not really let me send you a message back and say, well, you should be a programmer. You should sell ice cream. You should raise cows. You should, I don't know. We can go anywhere with that. So that's why a very specific question about a very specific thing is going to help me quite a bit. I would highly recommend you keep the questions down to a very succinct, very precise type of question. It helps me a lot. And I'm able to answer all of those that come to me. Let's go to 571. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? 571. When I pick up the phone, it beeps on your side. So when you hear that beep, that's what that happens to be. Are you there, caller? 571? You on mute? Are you not on mute? And 571, they hung up. That's okay. We'll go to 661. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Professor. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. What's your name?
Hello, Professor. My name is Luis. I'm calling from Long Beach.
Oh, welcome. What can we do for you, Luis?
Hello, Professor. I installed Linux on my Windows 10 Pro.
Nice.
My processor supports virtualization. I was able to download Linux from the Windows Store. Do you think that was a good idea?
You were able to download Linux from the Windows Store. How exactly did you do that with Microsoft?
Do you think it's better to just install a clean instead of doing virtualization?
I guess it depends on what you're going to do. I think for the most of us, a virtualized environment works very well. I have a Mac OS desktop that I'm running on my primary computer, and I have a virtualized version of my website that is a Linux server. And whenever I need to do testing, because I need, of course, to update operating system files on my server from time to time, I need to update the underlying web software that's running. Maybe I need to update some of the files running on that. I load up my virtual machine, I update my VM, and then I see how it works. I test it, I make sure things are still working properly, and if it works there, I feel comfortable that I can press those buttons on the production side and have it work on the production side as well. And in that environment, virtualized environment works great. That's perfect built for VMs. These days, it's hard to find something that would not operate the way we would expect in a VM. The only time you run into a problem running a virtual machine is when there might be something that is that talks to hardware directly, which is very rare, or it's a type of application that's very graphics intensive or very resource intensive. Obviously, running in a VM in those environments can be challenging if you don't have the resources available. But when you boot that operating system up natively, you're naturally going to have more memory available. You're going to have more CPU available. Because it's not running as a virtual machine. Those are pretty rare circumstances, though. I mean, if you're a gamer, that makes sense that you would want to be running in the native operating system. If you're doing something like a CAD CAM or video editing, you probably want to be in a native operating system rather than a virtual machine. But for almost every other type of application, VM probably is going to work fine for you.
When I was installing Linux, it asked me for a swap partition.
Sure.
I guess Linux worries about resources. I guess that's when it runs out of RAM space.
In Linux, the swap is used in a little bit different ways than it is for Windows, but of course it is used when it needs to be able to swap things in and out of standard memory and be able to use that. And of course, whenever you build out a virtual machine, it is in its own area of the drive. It's effectively one big single file that it's working from. So you don't have to worry about it conflicting with any of the other swap that you may be using in Windows. That's a completely different type of swap. That's a completely different area of your hard drive. Those two operating systems work independently.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's because I was trying to use the cloud, maybe get a $5 Linux box, and sometimes they give you like the minimum resources that swap might be a good idea to use.
And it's true. In fact, if you go to like an Amazon web service, they will give you the basics of a web server, and they have a free tier, so you can install it for free and use the fundamentals. But you'll notice you have a limited drive space, you have a limited amount of memory, you have a limited amount of network that you're able to use. And if you do load up an application on that does need a lot of resources, then you do run into problems with that, certainly.
Thank you, Professor. Sometimes I just need to say this out loud.
Nope, you're spot on. Keep doing what you're doing with those virtualized environments. The more you know about Windows, Linux, Mac OS, and other operating systems, the better a technician you're going to be. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you, Professor.
Thanks for calling. I appreciate it. That's always a nice thing to know. Whenever you're in an environment and you're working a lot with certain operating systems like Windows, you never get out and touch a Linux or touch a Mac OS. The first time you're going to be presented with that, you're going to be at a disadvantage. And you will be presented with a case where you'll need to know some Linux or you'll need to know some Mac OS. You never want to be in a situation where you're looking at the screen wondering, what in the world am I looking at? And these days, it's so easy to run Windows, Mac OS, those types of things. So it's just easier and easier to run those operating systems. You should take advantage of that if you possibly can. And by the way, for those of you, I've mentioned this before, but it's worth mentioning again. If you are studying for your 902 or the 1002 exam, and you're needing to download, or you need an operating system that you may not have available on your local machine. Maybe you're running Linux, maybe you're running Mac OS, and you don't have Windows, or you don't have Windows 10, or you don't have Windows 8, and you need those operating systems for the latest version of the CompTIA exams. You want to go out to modern.ie, MODERN, modern, like the modern man, modern.ie, the modern world. There's a tools pull-down menu. It redirects you over, by the way, to the developer.microsoft.com website, and it takes you over to the Microsoft Edge part of the developer website. There is a tools pull-down menu that has a virtual machines link, and in that virtual machine, you can download Windows 7, Windows 8.1, or Windows 10 as a VM and run this. Let's say I choose Windows 10. You can run it in VirtualBox, Vagrant, VMware, Hyper-V, or Parallels. And those will all run in Windows and Mac and Linux in the case of a few of those. So you can run the Windows 10, download it, and you have a fully functional version of Windows. The end-user license agreement is specific. It says this is for lab use. This is for non-production use. You can't use this as your primary desktop. You can't run anything production with this, and it will expire after 90 days anyway. But if you just need a copy of the operating system so you can get some hands-on, it's free. Just do it right there. And you can use VirtualBox, which is also free. Run virtualization, download the operating system, and you have all the operating systems you need to be able to pass your A+ certification exam. So that's my little tip. If you ever need to figure out how to make that happen, that's a good way to do it. Let's go back to 571. Hello, caller. Which name were you calling from?
Hey, Professor Nasser. My name is Blaze. Earlier, my phone died, so that's why I was not able to.
No problem. What's your question?
Yes. So I do have a question about the. Earlier, we were talking about the cloud services. Now, you did mention the RAID 1 that it's something that it doesn't have any backup or anything like that. Like RAID itself is not a backup. I didn't really get that part.
Yes.
You said it's not a backup, but it's only a resync, or that part. That part was just really confusing.
People are sometimes thrown by that because we look at RAID, and most versions of RAID that we're working with, which would be the RAID 1, the RAID 5, the RAID 10, we're always thinking about this as having redundancy, so that if we lose a drive, we're still up and running. That's one of the beauties of RAID, is the redundant array of inexpensive disks. The redundancy is an important part of that. And then I throw out this all the time, and you're not the only one to sort of catch on to this and say, what? Is that RAID is not backup. RAID is never backup, or RAID is not designed to be backup, and RAID isn't backup. Backing up your system is something completely different than keeping your system up and running. And if you can think of a scenario where you need a backup, let's say you're supporting a customer or supporting your company. The guy calls from accounting. He accidentally deleted all of the payroll files, and he needs a copy of those. He needs them restored quickly. Well, no problem. His server is on a RAID array. We'll simply go to his server. Oh, his RAID array is RAID 1. It keeps a duplicate of everything that's on the other drive. And when he deleted all the files, his RAID array promptly deleted them on both drives, because it keeps an exact duplicate of what's on the current active drive. And so there's a scenario where RAID isn't going to help you. Suddenly now all the payroll files are deleted. RAID promptly deleted them when the user deleted them, and now the files aren't existing. The only place those files would be is on your nightly backup. So go back to your nightly backup, pull them from tape, pull them from extra drives that you put them. Maybe you back up to the cloud, pull them from your cloud backup, and restore the files onto that RAID array. That's what I mean when I say that RAID is not backup. You should never use RAID like it is backup, because as soon as you do that, the guy in accounting is going to delete all of the payroll files.
Okay. So I think that does answer the question. I think that's more clear. I think what part of the 1001 was it that talks about RAID and storage?
I appreciate you bringing that up, by the way, because I often do these things kind of as a drive-by, and I throw out, hey, RAID's not backup, and then I don't say anything about it. And people are often left wondering, what do you mean? Where did you go with that?
Yeah.
What happened there? So that's always good to have some type of work through what I meant exactly in that scenario. You will find RAID configurations in the 1001 exam. Let me bring this up on my screen so everybody can see it. If you're watching this live, actually can't see it very well. Let me bring it down here. In section 3.4, which is given a scenario, select, install, and configure storage devices. There is a configurations there for RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, and RAID 10. Those are the 4 different RAID types you have to know about, and it's in section 3.4.
Okay. All right. Perfect. I think I see it. Yeah.
That's the place. And that's why some people will say, but you didn't talk about RAID 6. You didn't talk about RAID 4. I mean, these are real RAID types. They really do exist. Well, they're not in the exam objectives. Would it be useful to know more about that particular RAID type? Yes, it would. If you get into a scenario where you're using that RAID type, of course it would be good. But as far as the exam is concerned, RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, and RAID 10, or what some people call 1+0. That's it. That's all you need to know. So focus on those 4. Later on, if you need to know more about other types of RAID, knock yourself out. Before the exam, that's all you need to know.
All right. Awesome. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Thanks for calling. That's always useful. I do those things from time to time. So I appreciate someone calling me out on some of those things where I just drive by and say, yeah, RAID's not backup. So anyway, and then you're like, wait, hold on. What do you mean RAID's not backup? That is, by the way, a pretty important consideration when you're talking about, is RAID something that I can use as a backup mechanism? Because unfortunately, people do use it as a backup mechanism, and it's not. So don't do that. It's an exceptionally bad idea to get to that scenario where you're relying on RAID as the backup mechanism. So don't do that. And always call me out on those. If I ever do one of those drive-bys, find out what I'm talking about. Put some messages in the chat. Call me up on the phone line. Hit the contact us link where I can add some clarification, because I'm more than happy to do it and make sure that it's there. And you're right. A lot of people in the chat room, people are going, yeah, some people do make that mistake with RAID. And suddenly the guy in accounting is calling and he wants to get his files restored. And you're like, but you're on RAID. You don't need it restored. What happened? And we don't, no backups. That's not good. Don't be in that position. That'd be super bad to have that scenario. That's where you have to deal with this. There was a good question, a networking question that came up. This was, I guess this is sort of an A+ question, more of a network plus question, where the question in the chat was, the materials that you've read say that switches route data according to MAC address. I think a better term, if you're working through this, switches will make forwarding decisions based on MAC address. That is true. Where a router makes forwarding decisions based on an IP address. Correct. That is the primary difference between a switch and a router, is how they make forwarding decisions, how they determine where they send data to next. Switches do it with MAC addresses, routers do it with IP addresses. Given that your local device, local hosts on a LAN have IP addresses behind a NAT, is that still the case in real life? It absolutely is. So a layer 2 device, a switch, always makes its forwarding decisions based on a MAC address. And in fact, most every device in your environment, in your infrastructure, is connected to a switch. Your laptop's connected to a switch. Your wireless network is connected to a switch. Your workstations are connected to switches. Your servers are connected to a switch. That is the device that everybody connects to, is a switch. Once you're sending information into that switch, let's say that you would like to communicate out to the internet, how does the switch know how to get your packet of information to the router that handles that internet connection and ostensibly handles that network address translation, that NAT? So the switch has to know the MAC address of your computer. It has to know the MAC address of the router. and it's able to send it to that router with the MAC address forwarding that it does. And the router, of course, grabs that information and IP address wise knows how to send that out to the rest of the internet. So it's a layered communication and how it's operating. Hold on one moment. It's a layered address in the way that's communicating. And that's why we mentioned layer 2 and layer 3 as part of the OSI model, because those devices operate at a different level of networking. It becomes a lot clearer when you get into your Network Plus, where I will take a packet capture and I show you how the packet is designed, how it operates across the network. And you can clearly see the layer 2 part of the packet. You can clearly see the layer 3 part of the packet, the layer 4 part of the packet. And you can really see where all of these devices are making their forwarding decisions by what they're looking at inside of that packet. The more complex devices like next generation firewalls look at the entire packet. Switches only look at the MAC addresses. Routers only care about IP address. It just depends on the device and how you're connecting everything together that make the big difference. The more you learn about how those devices operate and the more you know about the way the network is operating, the better technologist you're going to be. I often say that the network certifications that you get are kind of the glue that holds the rest of IT together. Whether you're doing database management, maybe you're managing data centers, maybe you're handling servers, maybe you want to go into security, maybe you do pure network administration. Knowing how the network operates is going to make you better at every single one of those jobs. So that's why I often will tell people, yes, A+ is a great place to start. It gets you that job in the help desk. It gives you the foundation you need to build on. But if you really want to start branching out, learn more about the network. And from there, you can go anywhere. You can use that technology and that knowledge of the network and use it in whatever you want to do in information technology. It's a great jumping off point. Well, that brings us to the end of another hour, or almost an hour, of what we were doing with our questions today. Thank you for being here during the first hour of the study group and going through the Q&A. And thanks for your calls and the messages in the chat room and the questions you're asked in this second hour. We couldn't do this without your help. It would be pretty boring if I was just sitting here and talking the whole time. Nobody wants that, especially me. So thank you. It really does make it go so much easier when we have your input, and we appreciate it. Come back in a couple days. On Thursday, we're going to do this again. It's going to be all about the 1002 exam. So if you're studying for A+, come back for the second part of this. We'll do more hour of Q&A at the beginning, and we'll open up the phone lines again if you have more questions about the 1002 or anything else. We're more than happy to talk about whatever's on your mind. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next time on the A+ Study Group.